Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Hurricane Hunt. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci, joined with me and my weather brother Sean Sublette. We are both with the Lee Enterprises weather team, or more affectionately known as the Lee weather team here. We are talking about what we have going on into Labor Day weekend. And Sean, I love Labor Day weekend, but you know who else likes Labor Day weekend? The tropics.
It does, like Labor Day weekend, and the tropics are especially active. That is not necessarily going to be a bad thing, but we'll explain all that in a minute. But it is
Yeah,
very active out there.
yes, it is definitely active out there, but nothing really hitting us in the United States. We had Idalia earlier this week.
Mhm.
That is offshore. None of these storms that we talk about in this video are going to impact us directly, but there still will be rip currents and high surf through the weekend. Sean, I am one who lives at the Jersey Shore, and I haven't been liking what we've been seeing on the waters. Although I will say by Labor Day, it will weaken a little bit and the waters will be a little bit calmer here. So, Sean, take us
Yeah.
away. Just take us through. You put five things on this map.
I mean, it's a busy map, right? So we're Labor Day weekend. We're getting to the apex of hurricane season. There are five systems out there. So Idalia, we'll come back to that. Franklin is still a hurricane. It's beginning to lose its tropical characteristics as it goes in the North Atlantic. If you missed it, Gert and Jose formed over the last day and a half. Neither of those are especially strong, and they're going to stay out in the open Atlantic. Earlier on Friday morning, a new tropical depression formed off the African coastline. That's Tropical Depression 12. Will likely become Tropical Storm Katia in the coming day. But even that does not look like it's going to survive all the way across the Atlantic basin. Was looking at some of the computer guidance, the numerical guidance, as we get to 8, 10 days from now, there will probably be something else coming off the African coastline. So a week and a half from now, that's probably when we need to stay or start paying closer attention to what's going on the tropical Atlantic, at least with impacts to the United States directly, because the water is certainly going to stay plenty warm. I mean, we like to say it's about 78 degrees is when you really want the temperatures to be warm enough to support tropical development, and not a shock this time of year. Most of the Atlantic basin where we get tropical storm development, well over 80 degrees. As we saw down with Idalia, that water was 88, 89 degrees earlier on. And speaking of which, take us through, because it's not, we talked about this earlier, it's not just racing off into the North Atlantic, is it?
No, it's hanging around with us through Labor Day weekend. And that's why we're going to have those rip currents and the rough surf and even some coastal flooding as we go into the weekend as well, especially through Saturday here. Idalia is a post-tropical cyclone. And for my New Jersey friends, we know about post-tropical cyclones because that's what Sandy was when it made landfall. But post-tropical cyclone means it is lost its tropical elements here. As of the 11 a.m. advisory, it still has strong winds, 60 miles an hour. It still has winds like a tropical storm. It's still bringing a lot of rain where the storm is well offshore, but just not anything of the tropical characteristics. Now, the thing is, this looks to regain tropical characteristics as we go into the weekend, have a warm core to the storm here. And it will go to the east, kind of loop around Bermuda here, and it doesn't really move all that much between Sunday and Wednesday. So between Sunday and Wednesday, it's moving. What do you think, Sean? 400 miles north. That's not a lot when you're talking about this thing's moving 24 hours a day. So it's moving pretty slow here, with the Dahlia. But taking a zoom out to the Atlantic, and like we said at the beginning, it's busy. And part of the reason why it's busy is this map that we're going to show you right here, and Sean's going to take you through.
Yeah, a couple of weeks or so ago, there was a lot more dust over top of the Atlantic. Periodically we have these big swells of dust that come off of the Sahara Desert over top of the Atlantic Basin, and there's a little bit, but there's not an awful lot. Remembering that if you've got a lot of dust, the sun reflects off of that, it dries out the atmosphere, so it's tougher for tropical cyclones, hurricanes, tropical storms to develop. But there's not a lot of it out there. And that's why we think it is going to be an especially busy time over the next week, 10 days, probably a couple of weeks as we get toward the peak of the season. But as we alluded to before, there's no imminent threat. When we look at the steering winds, where these systems are going to be going over the next 5 or 6 days anyway, all of it kind of points to everything staying offshore, kind of pushing everything back out into the Atlantic. And actually, toward the middle of next week, that area of high pressure you see kind of edging closer toward the coastline is going to make it quite hot on the East Coast, but it also effectively protects us from any kind of tropical development. So we are getting close to the peak of hurricane season. Joe, take us through the map or through the scale, if you will, of how
Yeah.
the climatology plays out.
Yep, we are in September, and that means prime time for hurricanes here. The peak is September the 10th, but you could see where we are recording this today. We're pretty darn close to that top.
Mhm.
And it's not just tropical storms and hurricanes. You see those darker colors as you go lower on the chart. Those are just hurricanes in that kind of medium red, and then major hurricanes, Cat 3 or later, or higher, I should say, in the darker reds here. And notice that jump in the major hurricanes, as we go into September there. So it's not just hurricanes we're talking about, but these major hurricanes like Idalia, which made landfall in the Big Bend of Florida on earlier this week here. So that's what we have for Hurricane Hunt. It's a shorter episode for you. Don't want to hold you up. We know it's Labor Day weekend. We all got plans. Sean, what are you doing this Labor Day weekend?
I am celebrating some college football. Penn State and West Virginia are kicking off, and Penn State's a 20-point favorite, which kind of scares me. I'm always antsy about being such a big favorite so earlier in the season. Plus, we're going over to a friend's house who's a West Virginia alum.
Mm.
So hopefully, I'm not doing the next hurricane hunt from the hospital.
Yes, hopefully not. Hopefully you're in one piece when we see everybody again next week. So happy Labor Day to everybody who's celebrating out there, whether you're working or whether you're having fun. We got plenty of nice weather along the East Coast and into the Southeast here. For Sean Sublette over in Virginia, I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci, based in New Jersey. And thanks again for watching Hurricane Hunt.